I'm excited to talk to you about human-centered design principles in science communication. I imagine a world where science and design collaborate in all aspects of research and development, but especially in communication and sharing stories. And before we get a little too much into this, I really do want to show you something that I believe is a really fantastic science experience. I don't want to give it a lot of context. I don't want to ruin it. I want you to experience it without that, and we'll come back and talk to it. So without further ado, the DNA journey.
I'm proud to be English. My family have served and we've defended this country and have been to war for this country.
I'm really patriotic about Bangladesh.
Well, I am 100% Icelandic, yeah, definitely.
This is a Kurdish wedding with my mom in the traditional Kurdish clothes.
We're just proud Black, so that's it.
Yeah, I think we are probably the best country in the world, if I'm honest.
Think about other countries and other nationalities in the world. Are there any that you don't feel you get on with well, or you won't like particularly?
Germany. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the Germans.
You might think they're a little bit.
Particularly India and Pakistan, probably because of the whole, the conflict.
Because I have this side of me that's like, that hates Turkish people. Not people, but the government.
But French?
No. We're just best, it's just fact.
I'm more important than you. I don't know you, but in my opinion, I am strong and I am more important than a lot of people.
How would you feel about taking a journey based on your DNA?
Yeah, I feel very intrigued.
What could you possibly tell me that I don't know?
So do you know how DNA works? So you get half from mum and half from dad. So 50% from each of them, and they get 50% from their parents, and back and back and back. And all those little bits of your ancestor, they filter down to make you, you. I need you to spit in this tube for me. You spit up to the little black line.
That's a lot of spit.
The story of you is in that tube. What's it going to tell me?
It's going to be, oh yeah, you're French, and wait, your grandparents are French, and wait.
100% Bengali.
Solid Iraqi.
I'm Cuban.
You're going to tell me that I'm English, like I've told you.
Jay, can you come down and join us?
I'm a little bit nervous, I have to say.
So you ready to find out your results? Will you read it out to us, please?
Look at me.
Oh my God. Oh, wow. Shit. I didn't expect that.
All of them.
Whoa! No, no.
Caucasus, which was Turkish?
Yeah.
Eastern Europe, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Greece.
I'm 32% British.
What?
Great Britain, 30%. Can we 5% German?
I'm Irish.
Yeah, so I'm a Muslim Jew.
Great Britain, 11%. Are you sure these results are mine?
Eastern Europe?
Iceland has definitely moved closer to Europe now.
I'm going to go a bit far right now, but this should be compulsory. There would be no such thing as like extremism in the world if people knew their heritage like that. Like, who would be stupid enough to think of such thing as like a pure race?
In a way, we're all kind of cousins in a broad sense.
Mm.
In a much more direct sense, you have a cousin in this room. Turn around and guess who it is. Wash,
Yeah. What's that?
why don't you come down here and meet your cousin?
God. That's fun. I didn't know I did. This is like my heart pounding right now. It's such a Jay from everywhere, whatever it is. I'm a real man of the world.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you.
So would you like to travel to all of these places?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So since launching in 2016, the DNA Journey campaign had 37 million views on Facebook, 19 million views on YouTube alone. It was not meant as a science communication exercise, but it proves a very powerful science communication point, especially with regards to human-centered design. And yes, by the way, Alaha and Awaj are indeed cousins. It was originally produced as a campaign between Momondo, which was a travel broker, and the Ancestry.com, of course, the genealogy group. But there, if you recall, when the discussion about DNA and how DNA works was about maybe 10 or 15 seconds, but that did not create the connection that people had with the world and each other. It wasn't so much DNA, but DNA did bring them together. PTSD crisis right now from all of the change that feels like it's coming at us hard and fast. Whether it's driven by a viral pandemic or advances in technology, change can make people feel isolated and insecure and marginalized. And that's how information spreads and influences public policy over scientific data. And right now, we desperately need to inspire the next generation of research pioneers, you, to get us through the big changes and challenges we have ahead. Because look, it's frightening when we can't see ourselves in a future that we don't understand. And this is why communicating the value of science is so critically important. We need a new strategy and new thinking. Science communication with the public is most successful when it doesn't really rely on the science. And that's the nice way of saying that it's really all about the public. Science communication with other scientists, totally different, a very different language, very different context, a very different environment. Science communication with policymakers, also different language, context, and environment. But about the people, about human connection, about listening, about conversation, that's all very different. Dr. Richard Feynman, a very famous physicist, string theory, quantum mechanics, very famously said a long time ago that physics isn't the most important thing, that love is. And his entire life was teaching physics and researching physics. And he knew it's not the most important thing, that love is. And that is a very human-centered approach to his science, which is an approach to problem solving that centralizes human perspective throughout the entire process. And as many of you know and understand, the process begins with empathizing for the people that you're attempting to reach, your audience. It means observing without judgment. In fact, empathy is a very simple process, three-step process. Step one, observe without judgment. Step two, ask why with every observation. And step three, repeat steps 1 and 2 until the sun explodes. It's kind of simple. Next step would be to define the problem that you want to solve, because as we know, a problem well-defined is a problem half solved. Easier said than done, right? So let's start generating lots of ideas, because to get a great idea, you need lots of ideas, many of which will fail or go into the trash. Don't get rid of them completely, because you never know when one of them will have renewed value later. And prototyping. Let's build something, put it together, whether it's paper and crayon, or maybe just telling the story about something or describing it. There are lots of different ways to prototype your ideas, whether analog, digitally, whatever. We also want to be able to test all of these prototypes and ideas, and that we understand the problem and that we have correctly empathized with the people we're trying to connect with. And I know a lot of people, and sometimes I do agree with the saying that if you can't measure, you can't manage. To some degree, I think that is a little correct, but it's not law. And so there are lots of different ways that we learn how to measure something along the way when we're not sure exactly what those metrics really are. So to begin, I like to start just with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This was written in 1943 by Abraham Maslow, as a psychologist, who came up with this fantastic pyramid of basic human needs, as all people around the world, regardless of position and where they are geographically. And so what are the most important things to us? But then to create a pyramid of what's the single most important foundation of our needs and where we go from there. Again, don't consider this law, but it's pretty good. And it's a great place to start, at least. So as we move into defining the problem area of our science communication, I'm sure a few of you have seen this process for design, where it definitely starts out looking a lot like noise, a lot like chaos. We're trying to find patterns, not so much to make our design scalable, but the patterns also show us where the anomalies are, because anomalies can sometimes hold incredible value. The concept and prototyping part, which begins to give us more direction, or at least define and clarify our direction, until we get to a design where we're really testing that. We're doing mock-ups, we're doing drafts at that point, and user testing on things. Understand also at the concept stage, sometimes also in the prototype stage, concepts are not for development. Concepts are for discussion. Mock-ups sometimes can be concepts. Sometimes mock-ups are actual drafts. They do go to development. But first, concepts, like concept cars, are never meant for the assembly line right away. When they come out, they're trying to test it in a market. They're trying to test features. They're trying to test whether or not this model is a scalable model. Many of you may be familiar with the design consultancy IDEO. They are certainly known for their human-centered approach and design thinking. A lot of their research done around creating innovative solutions to problems, very human problems. So this really interesting graph, and one of the reasons, again, I don't necessarily believe this is all law, but it's a great place to start. And I think the opportunity to understand what inspires an idea, how we can start manifesting that idea and then implementing and acting on it and giving it action is really important. What's also interesting on this graph is exactly, I shouldn't use exactly, is very close, a mirror of how your intended audience will perceive and accept and act on the ideas that you are communicating to them. It is the process and the practice that the designer and the scientist use, but it is also the process and the practice that the audience receives it and accepts it. So once you start getting into this area of ideation, where do we start coming up? Brainstorming is a great way to say it, but there are a lot of things about brainstorming we need to be careful about. Instead of no, but, we should respond with yes, and, to be open to all of those ideas, those diversity of perspectives among everyone. without giving it judgment, but to see whether or not it is accurate or inaccurate. I use a process and practice within SpacetimeLabs, strategic imagination. And that's the ability to really think creatively and critically when solving problems, looking beyond linear time and considering all of the challenges, opportunities, and possibilities that are in front of you. It's a kind of advanced research, at least in this context, that applies strategic imagination toward an asymmetric reward that reduces the cost of risk and increases the value of outcomes. Some of you may know that better in blue ocean strategy, which was referred to as value innovations, very similar, because the value of the outcome, the result sometimes is really a better question. So in these strategies of imagination and ideating, one of them is known as speculative fiction. And many of these strategies that I'm about to explain, they're all very, very similar. They have little nuances, little things that makes them different. Most of them, the differences are the result that you get from it, or at least the meaning of the result that comes from it. Speculative fiction is world building. You would certainly could say that science communication is world building, and that science itself and the research is also world building. One great way to practice speculative design in science communication is in games, especially video games and role-playing games. They're not just for entertainment, but they use entertainment and play, which is a phenomenal way to research anything. But they use this method of play in order to introduce ideas safely, to introduce concepts and challenges with almost zero risk. It's important, of course, to be inclusive in these games so that you get a diversity of ideas, but there's always a story architect, whether it's a video game or if it's a role-playing game. In games like Dungeons and Dragons, of course, you've heard of dungeon masters. In other games, though, they're game masters or story architects. And just earlier today, I saw that the Library of Congress was inviting game developers to create video games that would include the public in civic studies, and of course, opened up their library to everything that they have digitally reproduced to use in their games with prizes and those things, because games are much more than just for entertainment. There's another form of strategic imagination called design fiction. Now, design fiction focuses a lot on the artifacts of everyday futures. It is looking forward, and sometimes, yeah, you could use some historical fiction as well. Steampunk, I think, is an excellent universe for design fiction. You might go to Comic-Cons and see people with various artifacts and accessories, and that's thinking along those same lines. Design fiction as artifacts from the future. A gentleman by the name of Julian Bleecker is known for really coining that phrase and pioneering this. If you check out Near Future Laboratory, a really interesting group. And in that group also, a gentleman by the name of Dre Labra, who has a design fiction daily. And every day he posts something as an artifact from everyday futures. And these are things that might be just laying around the house, or something you might pass on your way to work. It's a billboard or something that gives you an indication or tells a story without telling the whole story, and that gives you a sign. I think Dre may have actually created this last month, perhaps, when Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, had issued an advisory, mental health advisory in isolation and depression. And social media figured into that advisory quite a bit. And I think it's a very interesting forward thinking or forward looking design into what our future might look like with social media if regulation occurs. Another form is critical design. And that's really focused on issues, maybe climate change, equity, diversity, inclusion, LGBTQ social issues. Specifically, we created this based on the idea, and I think it might have been Noah, somebody from Europe, perhaps an organization from Europe, that mentioned we should start maybe naming heat waves across the globe, because they are in effect like hurricanes. They're major weather events. If you live on the East Coast, you're experiencing one right now, not a heat wave, but it's a weather event, of course, because of the wildfires that are, I'm looking out my window now and it's a little hazy, right? Should we get used to this? I hope we don't get used to it, but is this going to become more common? Are these wildfires going to have names? And how will we track these over time? And I think the important part of creating these critical designs and giving them names especially is so that we can follow them, so that we can compare them. If you have heat wave Viola, what category is that heat wave? Is it a Cat 1, Cat 2, Cat 3? What would make a category 1 heat wave different from a category 2? And having those conversations invite people in to learn more and be part of whatever that design may be. Futures design, you might understand or know a little bit better because they involved products and the development of products. And design is, of course, a futures practice. Much of what we are doing is for a later release, or whether it be software or a digital product of some other kind, physical product perhaps. So futures design takes a look at what all of, and it really does begin in concept stage, or what are the features we're missing? What are the benefits we should be promoting? Benefits being far more important than features. It's what users attach to, of course. Features are nice, but benefits are everything. And the way to get into that, of course, would be to start prototyping and creating these products that bring us closer to subjects in science, areas of study, maybe reference tools that we can use in academia. Life of Stars is actually a project that we're working on with Dr. Kim Arkan, who was a guest here, I think last month, on our universal design and data sonification. Fantastic, groundbreaking work in science communication. With all of that data on stars from Chandra, what would it look like as an augmented reality series so that you could see the life of a star? Pick any star. Well, any star from the library, that, because we don't have a library of 1 billion items. So we're working on it. We're getting there. And of course, science fiction, which an author once, and I don't remember the name of the author, who once described science fiction as the R&D of humanity. And this is really nuanced by the prototyping that we see in science fiction. Any science fiction movie, any science fiction video game, perhaps maybe a book or a comic book, a graphic novel. Science fiction includes things that have products and prototyping the future, whether it's in Minority Report, the driverless cars that are part of, mass transit at that point. All science fiction has some prototype of some kind to it. And one of these examples is maybe a podcast that we were developing about what happens when we find evidence of extraterrestrial life. I'm not going to say what kind of evidence that is, but it would certainly change our perspective. What would our media sound like? Our breaking news, our follow-up news, the news panels, those things. What would that sound like? So there are different elements, different products that we can create that connect people to science by using just our imagination. Because people connect with the science fiction before they connect with the science. Science fiction is a gateway to science. The imagination is a gateway to science. And I think in some ways, scientists may not be or may not feel comfortable using, or at least being speculative on their science because it might risk their integrity and their credibility. And I totally understand that. It makes sense. But if an institution were to stand behind those scientists and allow them and give them the space to speculate, with caveats, of course, I think that would increase the integrity and the credibility because of the connection that you can make with people in that way. There are a lot of astronomers who kind of tilt their head and look a little differently at astrology. However, without astrology, I bet we wouldn't have much astronomy, would we? Because it was that first connection that people had with the stars. In fact, they saw themselves in the stars because I'm a Virgo, or I'm a Capricorn, or I'm a Taurus. Did you know the eye of Taurus is a star, Aldebaran, right? And in that constellation of Taurus is the Pleiades, the seven sisters, right? Have you looked at the grille of a Subaru car? Have you seen the logo of Subaru? It's the Pleiades. So we use that mythology or the fable or the fantasy. Science fiction is fantasy. Science fiction is also a prototype of the future. The imagination is how people connect with science. Listening, conversation, and connection are all parts of the process and practice in human-centered communication. Don't try to change human behavior in science communication. It is very hard to do. It takes a very long time. And you're talking about changing belief and identity, and that's just not how minds work. Science or anyone else cannot change another person's identity. That's something that they do themselves. So don't try to change human behavior. Instead, use human behavior to make change. Understand how that behavior connects with an aspect of your research and find a way to create that curiosity, that doorway that allows people to cross the threshold themselves. Don't push them through the door. Not encouraged. Let people walk through the door themselves. And then the science that they explore and discover becomes their science. And it's much harder for them to deny that information in science. When you're telling that science story or that research story, bring your audience into that. Because if they can't see themselves in your vision of the world or that scenario or that future, it doesn't exist. And it won't. You will struggle to get that connection if people cannot see themselves in that vision. Like we said earlier, it's very frightening when we can't see ourselves in a future that we don't understand. And if people struggle to understand you, well, they will struggle to support you. And so science really needs to take that step back and understand that it's not always science first. And with the public, I would even say it's rarely science first. It becomes the thing that they almost trip over and realize that all of the value was there all the time. And that when we create science experiences, we need to give them something that's worthy of their investment, worthy of their time, of their attention, and maybe their money. If we've asked them to make a contribution, or if they wanted to buy a really cool t-shirt that has Harvard Research Library or User Research Center, I think that would be cool. But give them something that's worthy of their investment so that they own it. And when they own it, it becomes their science. Carl Sagan famously said, imagination will often carry us to worlds that never were, but without it, we go nowhere. Science can invest more in experiences of the imagination in order to bring people in, invite people in to be part of that research journey. It's very powerful. at an age when our technology is advancing quickly, when our threats from the environment and our abuses of it are threatening days ahead, when our health is at risk, when we face uncertain futures and are frightened, imagination can take us to better worlds. And that's why I believe that this is the imagination age, and it's more important now than ever.